So I think we are ready to begin. I apologize for all the technical difficulties. So it is being recorded just so that we can go ahead and place the workshop on our website and then have access to it throughout the months to come for our students and our parents. I'm Carol Perez. I am the mental health professional for our 11th and 12th caseload here at GAR High School. And with us today, we have Miss Jasmila Smith, who is also our mental health professional for 9th and 10th grade students here at GAR. And I'd like
Hi.
to give a warm welcome to Pathways, Mariela and Cecily, for being here today and putting on this workshop for grief and loss. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Mariela and Cecily. And just let me know when you need me to advance to the next slide, and I'll go ahead and control that for you guys. Okay?
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Carol, for that introduction. So I just want to say hello, everyone. My name again is Mariela Ayala, and I'm here with my colleague, Cecily Haregui. We want to first start off by saying just thank you to GAR High School for inviting us to present. And we especially want to send a big thank you to all the students who are just also are joining us and will be checking out this workshop too, because it's really great. And with that said, we can go ahead and just sort of share a little brief background on who we are. So Cecily and I are MSW interns, and today we're here representing, as Carol stated, we're here from Pathways. Pathways is a nonprofit agency that provides hospice and caregiving support for the elderly. Pathways also specializes in grief and bereavement support. And because November is Grief Awareness Month, we feel honored to be invited here to talk about grief and loss with you all. Now, because in general, grief and loss can be a very heavy topic to talk about, we wanted to sort of line up the mood with our first slide because in some way or another, we can all relate to the following memes. And then, Carol, can you go on to the next slide? And
So, like Mariela said, we could all relate to all the memes, especially considering the times that we've been in with this pandemic. You know, doing Zoom school, having to deal with all of the technical difficulties. It's created a lot of loss, and so some of these changes have been big and small. So we wanted to just take time and have start off with a laugh before we kind of get into the more heavy things. So now that we've kind of had time to look over these memes, we wanted to start and explore what grief is.
so, what is this thing called grief, right? Basically, grief, we want to understand it as a natural response to loss, and it shows up especially after a loved one dies. Grief, I'm sorry, is deep sorrow, and when we talk about sorrow and I'm sorry, when we talk about sorrow, the individual may experience overwhelming emotions. These emotions can include immense sadness or distress, and these emotions can sometimes just feel unbearable, right? Grief can also feel like a roller coaster, right? Who has been on a roller coaster? You go up through those ups and downs, you take those just loops, and it just all these ranges of emotions, ups and downs, like I said. And another important thing to think about and understand about grief is that everyone experiences grief in some way or another, right? um, and it's also really important to just understand that it, it's going to be an individual and unique experience to all of us, right? We're all going to grieve differently. And also, in other occasions, we might find ourselves grieving in similar ways too, right? So, in just reviewing what grief is and understanding that it's a natural response to loss, and specifically, oftentimes it shows up when we lose a loved one, right? We can go on to the next slide, Carol. Is death the only loss that we can experience, right? We know that it's not, right? And as we've gone through this whole year, right, we've all experienced all different forms of loss. And as a result, we've all experienced some grief too, right? We can go on to the next slide.
Ooh, yes, sorry. All right. So, what are some different kinds of loss that we've experienced? So, as the pictures appear, we've lost, that ability to go and have coffee with our friends, maybe after school, before school. Those really fun football games that you guys love to go to in the beginning of fall. Um, actually being in a classroom and having that experience to learn with your friends. Another kind of loss would be a breakup. That's something that's pretty common in a high school setting, as well as some of the school dances. That's something that we're losing today due to this pandemic, as well as the upcoming holidays. What do those have in store? What does that look like? Those are all different kinds of losses that we are experiencing this year because of this pandemic. Next slide, please.
And then because we all are experiencing those losses, as we've mentioned before, we're all going to experience grief, right? Whether, like Cecily mentioned, whether it's missing out on our school dance, our prom, graduation, all those things having to be postponed, right? It's going to affect all of us in different ways. And as we reviewed what grief was, right, we're all going to experience it in a unique way, right? Sometimes the way that it can sort of affect us, it can affect us in a physical way, right? It can maybe present itself with like headaches, stomach aches, body aches, maybe shoulder pains, right? Back pains. So you're feeling these physical symptoms, right? Another way that grief can show up is through emotions, right? We can feel sometimes sad, we can feel angry, we can feel irritable. We can just have, again, those roller coasters of emotions. One day we can feel happy, but then all of a sudden we just feel everything coming down, right? And then, of course, the other way that it can affect us is in our mental health, right? We can maybe experience some anxiety. We can experience maybe sleeping difficulties. Maybe we might have some insomnia, just again, having trouble sleeping at night. We can also even potentially experience some depression, right? So it's really important to understand and acknowledge that grief will affect us in different ways, right? And it's important to be just self-aware how that grief is affecting us, because then again we can be able to recognize that we are going through some type of grief, especially after we've been experiencing all these different forms of loss. And then we can go on to the next slide.
So, with talking about the different kinds of loss, we wanted to kind of throw it back and show how loss can impact us within our school. So, you're experiencing this loss. You're not in the classroom. You're not around your friends. You're not able to go to these dances. All of those losses can make it difficult to concentrate and actually focus on your classes that you're in. That could also stem into trouble in remembering what the lecture was about because you're worried because of how the losses are impacting you. That could also go into lack of motivation. Doing classes through Zoom, I know, can be very, very draining. And sometimes, it can cause a lack of motivation to actually wanting to show up to your Zoom classes. And then also, like we said, you're not able to be in your classroom, so that could feel really isolative. And these are just some of the ways that loss can impact us in our school. Next slide, please.
So we understand that there are several types of the way that people can grieve, right? The first one we want to sort of talk about is this first style of grief. It's called intuitive grief, right? And this grief sort of presents itself and just literally kind of just expressing all these emotions, right? Going back to just sort of those roller coasters of emotions, those ups and downs. This person is going to want to talk about what they're feeling, right? And just really being able to talk about what they're experiencing, right? some folks may feel like, wow, this person just wants to talk about that they're not doing well, and that's perfectly normal. That's the way that they're expressing their grief, right? One way to sort of think about this intuitive grief is that, if we sort of focus on this binary thing, it's sort of more of the feminine way of grieving. However, though, it's not specific to feminine, right? Other folks can also express this type of intuitive grief, right? So it's really important to understand that, bottom line, this style of grief is more about emotions, right? You're expressing those emotions and you're just feeling a lot of that, and it's being mirrored in the way that you're expressing yourself. Next slide.
And the other style of grief is instrumental grief. So this style of grief is different from the other one that Mariela was talking about. So this style of grief is more cognitive, more physical or behavioral way. So it's more thinking than feeling. So people that grieve this way are more focused on doing activities in response to that grief. So an example of this would be someone that has they've experienced a loss and they start working on a project that they've said that they've always wanted to work on. It's more of like someone that's more of the doer. They're going to take whatever grief they have and they're more of the doers. And another thing is this is also known as the more masculine way of grieving, but like Mariela said, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only way. People that are more feminine do also grieve this way. And an important thing to know about these styles of grieving, that these are only two styles of grieving. There's many different styles, and there's no right or wrong way to grieve. These two styles are just examples of different ways that people do grieve in response to loss.
And as we review this grief compass model, just going back on the ways of how we grieve, it's really also important, just to add on what Cecily said, is that when we understand how we grieve, we're also actually better we have the tools or the resources, and we're able to understand how to communicate more effectively with other folks that are grieving, right? Because again, as we we explore what grief means, right? Everybody grieves in a different way, right? Everybody is going to have their own unique experience. So it's also really important to just highlight that, right? That it's a better way for us to be able to understand when somebody else is grieving over maybe a same loss or a different loss, right? The bottom line is that we're all grieving in a different way. So when we look at this grief compass model, right? It was created by Dr. William Hoy, and pretty much what this really just explains is, when we're going through grief, right, especially when we have lost somebody, right, when it's the death of a loved one, and again, mind you that loss is not just losing a family member to a death, right? It can also include all the other losses that Cecily mentioned. We sort of go through, this again, these waves of, not waves necessarily, but more of like this compass, sort of, I guess you could say, an unstable ground, right? Sometimes you're remembering and you're reflecting on those stories of that thing that you did have, or that person that you did have, right? Maybe that can show up when you just recently experienced that loss, or again, when it's a person that just has died, right? Maybe it's at the funeral and you're remembering how this person was, right? Or in the times that we're in, maybe you're in class, in your Zoom class, and you're remembering, oh, remember when I used to walk to so and so's class, or I used to meet up with my friend at the after school, and maybe we used to go meet up at Starbucks. Those were fun times, right? So you're remembering, you're processing that, right? The other thing that's taking place is, a lot of times you'll also begin to realize and come to the reality, as you're remembering, that it's not the way that it used to be anymore at this moment, right? And especially with the things that were going on right now, like I said, we're going through virtual classes, we're not meeting up with our friends. we're acknowledging that things are not the same anymore at this moment, right? And at the same time, we're really just processing all those emotions. What's coming up for us, right? When we remember and when we realize that we can't hang out with our friends at the movies, right? When maybe we can't hang out with my classmate at the library when we used to study for finals, right? So just realizing those things are not happening the way that they used to be, right? The other thing that happens in this grief compass model, right? You're on these unstable grounds. You're also reaffirming, why are these losses taking place? Well, right now we're in a pandemic, of course, and we understand that there's certain things that we unfortunately have to do to keep ourselves safe, our loved ones safe, right? And we're all making just a lot of sacrifices, not just students, but teachers, everyone around, right? In order to make sort of sense of what's going on at this moment, right? And the last thing is, sort of releasing, especially when we've lost somebody, when somebody close to us has died. We are, in a sense, in a situation where we're now beginning to sort of think about, how do we remember these folks, or how do we stay connected to those memories of when we used to hang out with our friends after school. How can we now do that in other ways? Maybe we're doing it, again, FaceTiming. Maybe we're doing our own Zoom meetups or Google Meets and all that fun stuff, right? We're finding other ways so that we can still stay connected to those bonds, to those memories, to those losses that unfortunately have taken place during this year. And in going back as far as all the losses that we have experienced, right? Just in school alone, graduation, dances, gathering up with friends. How are we able to continue with just maintaining those bonds with our friends and holding on to those memories, right? And then we'll go on to the next slide.
So when we're thinking about all of the loss that we are experiencing this year, we have to think about the changes that go along with those loss. So permanent loss and temporary loss. So an example of a more permanent loss, like we've said, death is very permanent. This person is no longer with us here physically, so that would be considered a permanent loss. Transitioning from high school to college, that's, you're losing that kind of kid-like age, and you're going in and you're being seen as an adult. That's kind of like a permanent loss, as well as age. You're aging, you're getting older, sorry, and things are changing, so that's a permanent loss. So going into another, like a temporary loss, would be moving into a dorm and then back into your home. So that's, you're temporarily losing that independence, but that doesn't mean that it'll be like that the whole time. Or even, like we said, going virtual with school. It's something that it's happening right now, but we're hoping that it's temporary, and that you guys can go back to school as soon as it's safe to do so. As well as not being able to hang out with your friends due to this pandemic. That is a temporary loss. That's something that's not permanently going to be like that. It's something that hopefully we can get back to within the time, like when things are safe. And with knowing or recognizing these changes, an important thing to do is just honor the changes. These changes can be really scary, like we said. Thinking that your senior year would be the best year of your high school experience, and half of your year is already gone virtual, and you're not sure if you're going to be able to get back into school and be able to experience those things.
Mhm.
That's scary thing to look at. So trying to see the positive in these situations, you have to think of the things are like this for a reason. I'm safe, my friends are safe. They are doing the best that they can to still give us our education, but keep us safe so that we don't have to stay like this for years and years. And just another thing to do with the change is just giving yourself patience and grace. Like I said, the changes are scary, and the unknown can be the unknowns. So just be trying to be patient and take things day by day. And as well as recognizing your resilience. Like we've said, these losses bring a lot of emotions, a lot of things that go on with these with these losses. So recognize your resilience and how you're dealing and how you're coping with these losses. Next slide, please.
Right. So because we understand that definitely grief can affect us, right? We understand that, loss also brings these permanent and temporary changes. Sometimes, changes that are positive, sometimes they're negative, right? Either way, when we're going through loss and we're going through grief, right, we want to make sure that we do some self care, right? And some of these are do's and don'ts, right? So we want to make sure that we get plenty of rest, especially considering everything that students are going through right now. It's not just heavy going to classes. Trust me, I'm doing it myself too, right? And it takes a toll, right, on your emotional, on your mental health, even on your physical health, right? I can't sit for an hour and a half. It's a lot, right? So making sure we get plenty of rest, making sure you get those 8 hours of sleep, right, as much as possible is so important for your health, right? Especially when we're experiencing a lot of loss during these times. We want to make sure that one pretty neat thing that we can do is also practicing some breathing exercises. And it's simple, right? You can do that by yourself. You can do that even when you're in class, just taking those breathing moments to just breathe in and breathe out. And that just really helps with just your emotional well-being, right? To sort of do some self-regulation, right? The other thing though, I know this might be a tough one, but just disconnecting from social media, right? I know that right now, especially because we're not able to hang out with our friends or loved ones as much as possible. Sometimes even just taking a short break from social media and maybe just doing some other activity like listening to music or watching a favorite show or movie, right? And it could be with the people that you live with, reading a book, right? Doing something that just disconnects you from social media for a moment, right? Of course, the other important that we want to acknowledge is making sure that you still do continue connecting with your friends, right? And we talked about that you can do that virtually through Zoom, through FaceTime, text messages, Google Meet. So there's a lot of ways that we can continue doing that in a virtual manner and where we can all continue keeping ourselves safe, right? And the last part is talking to an adult or a counselor and even a friend, right? It's always important to be able to express those emotions, be able to talk about that, be able to just process that loss because it is real. What you're going through is real. We're all going through a loss in our own way, right? And it is important to be able to use those resources, use those tools so that you can be able to just explore what is it that you're going through, right? And so talking to an adult, talking to a counselor, talking to a teacher, and like I say, even talking to a friend, that's always something that you can definitely do as self-care, right? Things that we don't want to do, right, is of course isolate, right? Um, Definitely use drugs or alcohol to cope with our loss, right? Use violence, sleep too much or too little. And then lastly, of course, engage in any reckless behavior, right? All these don'ts, we want to make sure that we're very aware of that, right? And if we find ourselves doing any of these things, again, make sure that you talk and reach out to somebody so that you can talk about and be able to explore that loss that you're going through. Next slide.
Okay, so because we talked about something pretty heavy, with grief and loss, there's a lot that goes along with it. And like we said, emotions are high when we're dealing with loss. So we wanted to kind of take some time to, check back in with ourselves and just look at some happy pictures of puppies, just to kind of get ourselves in good spirits since we did discuss some things that are probably, bringing up some things. So just take a look at these beautiful puppies. They're so cute. Pick your favorite one.
Yeah. And I'm sorry we didn't put in I didn't put any cats, but I yeah, I'm sorry. I I do favor puppies or dogs more than cats. But I really do want to, again, I think to sum up this whole presentation, just to really acknowledge, a lot of the things that Cecily said. I think one of the things that sticks out for me, and my own just disclosure, is this year I turned 40. And unfortunately, I was looking to have this grand old party for myself, right? But it didn't happen. And I went through my own loss as far as not being able to celebrate that with my friends and my loved ones, right? Um, and I grieved over that loss, right? I was able to talk to my partner. I was able to talk to my family about what I was going through. And it's so important to be able to have those resources and have those tools, right? To be able to process, because the loss, like I said, that we're all experiencing is real, right? So we have to be patient with ourselves. We have to be patient not just with ourselves, but with others too, right? Because we're not the only ones that are experiencing loss. We all are, right? And I don't know, Cecily, do you have anything else to add?
Just wanted to say thank you for allowing us to be here, to talk about grief and loss. And then just to kind of reiterate, myself and Mariela are part of Pathways. We just wanted to let you know that the website is linked right there if you guys want any more information about the services that we provide. It also has our phone number. So we do, like we said, we do provide bereavement, grief counseling and support for families, adults, student base. We do presentations like we did today, as well as hospice and caregiving. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask us, anything like that. And once again, thank you so much for having us. We really do appreciate you guys inviting us here to share a little bit of information about grief and loss.
Thank you so much. Are you able to hear me? Good.
Yes, okay. We are.
There's always that weird transition. But thank you so much for being here. At this point, I don't see any questions in the chat box, but feel free, anybody that's in the meet, to unmute themselves and ask questions. We can use that time now.
It's that awkward moment. It's okay.
I had a question. Thanks for the information. That was really great. And I'm sure that our students that look onto this in the future will really gain from it. I was wondering what, at least at your agency, is there like a trend of like different ages or populations that you're seeing more of a need in, or is it just kind of random?
So basically, right now, I mean, we're getting assessments for, actually, we're getting assessments from school, well, referrals, I should say, referrals from schools. Unfortunately, we have had a few families that have been referred to us due to COVID, right? Which is pretty much is something that's real. It's happening right now. We've also had referrals from just adults that have learned about our agency, either by word or just visiting our website. So it ranges, but we do provide groups. As a matter of fact, right now we are facilitating groups to teens, middle schoolers, and elementary. We're doing them virtually. We're also doing some in person, but of course, we also have to respect those social distancing guidelines. So it ranges as far as where the referrals are coming from and the ages. And yeah, but they are coming because everybody is experiencing some form of loss, and then specific to experiencing death too as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
I had a question. Are the services free, or does the student or the family have to have Medi-Cal or insurance in order to qualify for the programs and the services that you guys provide?
Yeah, so our services are free. They don't have to pay for anything. Um, I mean, it's really good to kind of take advantage of that and get some more support when you're going through a loss.
Yeah.
And then if I was a student and I were to express interest and I wanted to maybe go to one of the groups that you guys have, what would that process look like for me?
So we would need the initial intake. That what they would do is they would have their caregiver or guardian call in and do a intake, which is usually done by like our receptionist, and then myself or Mariela or somebody else from the grief support team would call and schedule a day to complete an assessment. And then the assessment is really short, just to kind of gauge where they're at and see if they're kind of group appropriate, and see kind of what they're looking for in grief support. Some people don't like group meetings. Pathways really kind of is structured on groups. So just yeah, I think intake, and then we go from there. I know right now it's a little hard because we are doing it through Zoom and everything like that. So it kind of just depends on when we get the assessment. So it does take some time. That's just kind of, but we're really upfront with our clients and let them know, like, this is what we plan to do, this is what we're doing, and we're really open to sharing that with them.
And then just to clarify too, our grief and bereavement groups are specifically for anybody who has experienced a death close to them, right? So whether it's a parent, a sibling, or even just an uncle that lived in the home, a close family member that they lived with, those are folks that will certainly be able to provide those grief and bereavement support groups too.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Any other questions we have? Ms. Smith, I don't know if you had any questions.
All of my devices. No, I don't have any questions, but I do want to thank you guys for providing this workshop for our students tonight. You guys have done like workshops in the past for us, and we hope to like continue on with your services and programs, because it really does help. And like you said, we all need that support. We all need someone to speak to. So I encourage the students on here, if you have experienced some form of loss, please reach out and, ask for help, because it's there, and it's necessary. That's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you guys coming out and talking to our students and to us. It's always a good refresher for us as mental health professionals too. So thank you again. And we will be in touch as well. I'll go ahead and post the flyers and all of the information from your agency for our students to kind of take home and print out and have on their own. And hopefully we hear from you soon.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all the work that you are doing for our students too. I mean, we're all in this together. So thank you.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead and stop recording now, and we will be free to exit the meet whenever you guys are ready.